بسم الله والحمد لله ونصلي ونسلم على رسول الله. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وأصلح لنا شأننا كله ولا تكلنا إلى أنفسنا طرفة عين. So we reached last week the chapter من حقق التوحيد دخل الجنة بغير حساب, and we started the hadith. And just as a reminder, we'll just read the hadith one more time so it's fresh in our heads. So the first hadith of the chapter was عن حسين بن عبد الرحمن قال كنت عند سعيد بن الجبير فقال أيكم رأى الكوكب الذي انقض البارحة؟ فقلت أنا, ثم قلت أما إني لم أكن في صلاة ولكني لدغت. قال فما صنعت؟ قال ارتقيت. قال فما حملك على ذلك؟ قلت حديث حدثناه الشعبي. قال وما حدثكم؟ قلت حدثنا عن بريدة بن الحصيب أنه قال لا رقية إلا من عين أو حمى. قال قد أحسن من انتهى إلى ما سمع. ولكن حدثنا ابن عباس عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال عرضت علي الأمم فرأيت النبي ومعه الرهط والنبي ومعه الرجل والرجلان والنبي وليس معه أحد، إذ رفع لي سواد عظيم فظننت أنهم أمتي، فقيل لي هذا موسى وقومه، فنظرت فإذا سواد عظيم، فقيل لي هذه أمتك ومعهم 70,000 يدخلون الجنة بغير حساب ولا عذاب. ثم نهض فدخل منزله فخاض الناس إلى فيه أولئك، فقال بعضهم فلعلهم الذين صحبوا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم، فقال بعضهم فلعلهم الذين ولدوا في الإسلام فلم يشركوا بالله شيئا، وذكروا أشياء. فخرج رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فأخبروه فقال هم الذين لا يسترقون ولا يكتوون ولا يتطيرون وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. فقال عكاشة بن محصن فقال ادعوا الله أن يجعلني منهم. قال أنت منهم. ثم قال رجل آخر فقال ادعوا الله أن يجعلني منهم. فقال سبقك بها عكاشة. So in the last lesson we took the names تراجم الرجال who appeared in the hadith and the narration, and we reached the text. So we'll go through the شرح المفردات. One second. So we reached the first word in the text, which is Al-Kawkab. Al-Kawkab بمعنى النجم, star. So everybody knows this. Al-Kawkab. If you don't, so I mean everybody knows the word star. النجم. انقض أي سقط منه الشهاب. So انقض أي سقط. So can you tell me the meaning of سقط? ما معنى سقط؟ So generally the word, no. So سقط means to fall. سقط أي النزول من الأعلى إلى الأسفل. So you could say سقط سقط خالد في جحر. So Khalid fell into a hole. So انقض أي سقط منه الشهاب. So الشهاب is generally translated as a shooting star. As is mentioned as Allah mentions in Surah Al-Hijr, when he says إِلَّا مَنِ اسْتَرَقَ السَّمْعَ فَأَتْبَعَهُ شِهَابٌ مُبِينٌ. So when Allah is talking about the heavens, and as we know from the previous narrations, that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he explained that the shayateen, when they istaraqa as-sam', that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned about the soothsayers and the fortune tellers, that the shayateen, they basically they stand on each other up until they reach the lowest of the heavens, and by way of that they try to steal some of the information from the lowest heavens that is going to take place on the earth. And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, and then the angels, they pelt them with a star, with a shooting star, which is the explanation for shooting stars. And then he mentions in that hadith, which will come in one of these chapters, that before that shaitan is pelted with the shooting star, then they pass down the information that they received to each other until they inform the soothsayer or the fortune teller, and then the soothsayer or the fortune teller informs the person regarding something that's going to take place, and then they mix it up with 100 lies. And he mentions, so they forget the 100 lies, and all they remember is that one thing. So in the ayah, Allah says, إِلَّا مَنِ اسْتَرَقَ السَّمْعَ, that except for the one who manages to steal, فَأَتْبَعَهُ شِهَابٌ مُبِينٌ, and then a clear and manifest shooting star, he's followed by one of those, a shooting star. So basically he's pelted with a shooting star from one of the angels. Now, so in sometimes the Al-Khattab, depending where it's used, that it's translated as planet sometimes. Al-Khattab. Now, so if we look to the hadith, when Sa'id ibn Jubair, when he said, أيكم رأى الكوكب الذي انقض البارحة, that he says, which one of you saw a kawkab, the star, انقض, which was basically a shooting star. And then he moves on. البارحة هي أقرب ليلة مضت. It is the closest or the previous night. Yes, so it just means last night. Al-Bariha, simple translation, is last night. Here, so it's Al-Bariha here, aqrabu layla. It is the closest of the nights that has passed. Meaning, last night. يقال قبل النزول رأيت الليلة الزوال. So you would say, so it is said قبل الزوال, before the sunset, you would say رأيت الليلة, I saw the night, and then after the sun is set, رأيت البارحة. So he mentions لدغت. So if you look at he says, so he asked them a question by saying, which of you saw the shooting star al-bariha, last night? Then he says, أنا, ثم فقلت أنا. So he said, I said I. ثم قلت, then I said, أما إني لم أكن في صلاة لكني لضغت. He says, as for me, I was not praying, but لضغت. ما معنى لضغت؟ لضغت. So it's from the verb لدغ. لدغ يلدغ. نعم, to be stung. As from the famous hadith where he said, لا يلدغ المؤمن ولا يلدغ المؤمن من جحر واحد مرتين. That the believer, he is not stung. لا يلدغ المؤمن من جحر واحد, from the same hole, مرتين. That the believer is not stung from the same hole twice. It's a common hadith, which everybody's memorized in English. If you memorize in Arabic, يكون أحسن. لا يلدغ المؤمن من جحر واحد مرتين. So he said, لدغت أي لدغته عقرب. عقرب or عقرب. So he لدغته, he was stung by a عقرب. So an عقرب, as we know, or means a scorpion. And obviously, see, why does he mention here? Why does he mention لدغته? لدغته عقرب or عقرب with بتاء التأنيث. Why is it mentioned? Why is the fi'l mentioned بتاء التأنيث? Then obviously because عقرب is مؤنث. As again in our Arabic lessons, we mentioned there are some words that they don't end with ta al-marbuta. So these are just words that you have to learn that they are masculine or feminine. So aqrab is feminine. And obviously the plural is aqarib. Aqaribu. So he says walladghu. Walladghu. He says al-las'u. So he says al-las'u. So al-las'u is a bite or a sting. So he's just explaining now the word al-ladghu. What is the word al-ladgh? So he says al-las'u. Which is a bite or a sting. أي أصابته بسمها. So أي أصابته. So we know the verb أصابه, which means to be affected by or to be harmed by. So we see this word asaba in the Quran and in many hadith. أو لا يصاب المؤمن, or إذا أصاب المؤمن, when the believer is harmed, etc. أي أصابته, so again بتاء التأنيث, so it's feminine. لماذا؟ لأنه يعود إلى العقرب, أي العقرب أصابته بسمها. So السم, ما معنى السم؟ With its poison. نعم. So he says, yeah. ارتقيت. So he says, so when he was asked, فما صنعت. So in the hadith, he mentions, when he mentions he was stung by a scorpion, he was asked, فما صنعت. So just add this, صنع. So you'll hear it many times. صنع means to make, etc. But it also means فما فعلت. What did you do? So you say صنعت كذا وكذا. فما صنعت. And he said ارتقيت. أي طلبت من يرقيني. I requested من يرقيني, someone who could perform ruqya. So we all know what a ruqya is, which is the reading of ayat or some of the ad'iyah from the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam upon the place which is affected. So he says, وَالرُّقْيَةُ قِرَاءَةُ الْقُرْآنِ وَالْأَدْعِيَةُ الشَّرْعِيَّةِ. نعم. So Shaykh Fawzan makes a point here that ruqya is the reading of Quran, of the Kalam Allah. وَالْأَدْعِيَةُ الشَّرْعِيَّةِ, which is important, is some people who perform ruqya that they use other than this. So he makes a point that that which is most effective and that which the person should stick to is قراءة القرآن والأدعية الشرعية على المصاب, upon the person who is affected بمرض ونحوه, by an illness, ونحوه, and other than it, ومثله. So then he was asked, when he mentioned he performed ruqya, he says فما حملك على ذلك. نعم. So these are the types of words and verbs. You can't translate them really. So obviously hamala means to carry. So the فما ما حملك على ذلك. What caused you to do that? ما حملك على ذلك. قال أي ما حجتك على جواز ذلك. So ما حملك على ذلك. You see, if we translated it literally, then we wouldn't get, this is the intended meaning behind his question. أي ما, so when he says ما حملك على ذلك, he's asking him ما حجتك على جواز ذلك. So he's asking him a question, and what is your proof? What is your evidence or your proof for doing such an action? ما حجتك على جواز, about the permissibility of that. So then in the hadith, then he mentions قال, so he said قلت, I said حديث حدثناه الشعبي. If we go back to the hadith he mentions, so his answer was a hadith which was narrated, or which a sha'bi narrated to us. قال وما حدثكم. So he said to him, and what did he narrate to you? قلت حدثنا عن بريدة ibn al-Husayb أنه قال, so we reach that he says لا رقية إلا من عين, that there is no ruqyah except min ayn, from ayn. So he mentions al-aynu إصابة العائن غيره بعينه. So generally a person who gives is the cause of the evil eye, that he is called a a'in. A a'in. A asabatu, isabatul a'in, the harm. So obviously it's mudaf, mudafun ilay, is isabatul a'in, the harmfulness of the a'in. غيره, so غيره is مفعول به, other than him. So the person who gives an, so I wouldn't know, how would you translate an a'in? So if someone can write it, that'd be helpful. إصابة العائن غيره بعينه, a giver of evil eye, you see. It's just, yeah. It's
witch.
just, no, it doesn't have to be a witch, because you yourself, you could be an a'in yourself. All of us could be an a'in. It doesn't mean we are evil. It just sometimes we could give each other the evil eye, unintentionally, and also unintentionally we can give each other the evil eye. But there are people who are, yeah, envious. Yeah, so a'in, yeah, an envious one. Envious. There are some people who are renowned for it, that they are envious, evil people. If I remember, there was a person at the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab who was well renowned for it. And Umar ibn al-Khattab, I think he banished him to his house, put him under house arrest, not to leave his house, because he was renowned for giving people evil eye. So yeah, this is something anyone can fall into being an a'in, intentionally or unintentionally. So this is why, as we said, people shouldn't be putting photos of themselves or their children online, as evil eye could, as Ibn al-Qayyim mentions, that the evil eye. So how is evil eye given to somebody? That he basically, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he likens it to exactly like the bow and an arrow. That the a'in, it's as though he has an arrow and a bow, and he shoots it into that person who he's given evil eye to, that it's a physical thing. So yeah, so that's how he mentions how a person is affected. And it's mentioned that even a person can give evil eye just by describing a person. So some of the scholars mentioned, so how about if a person actually sees that person, or you put a photo up of somebody or yourself? So people should be warned and aware of these grave mistakes. إصابة العائن غيره بعينه. So he mentions أو حمى. So in the hadith, لا رقية إلا من عين أو حمى. So he says حمى, الحمى سم العقرب وشبهها. So the al-huma is the poison of a scorpion, وشبهها, and anything that resembles that. So it could be like the poison of a snake or anything else. And then he mentions قال قد أحسن من انتهى إلى ما سمع, which is a beautiful statement. قد أحسن من انتهى إلى ما سمع. So it literally means قد أحسن, that he has أحسن. So we know أحسن is a اسم تفضيل. من انتهى, the one who stops, إلى ما سمع, to the point or to that which he hears. So he mentions here أي أخذ بما بلغه من العلم, that he takes بما, that which بلغه, has reached him, من العلم, from knowledge. بخلاف, in opposition, من يعمل على جهل, in opposition to the one يعمل, who acts upon ignorance, أو لا يعمل بما يعلم, or he does not act upon that which he knows. So قد أحسن من انتهى إلى ما سمع. So as he says, so it's a person who that he hears or he learns something and he stops at that. And he doesn't add to it, doesn't take away from it, and he acts upon it. So he acts upon the knowledge which he receives. So he mentions, so now he mentions the main hadith where he says, the hadith of Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala an, where he mentions the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, عرضت علي الأمم قيل كان ذلك ليلة الإسرار, أي أراه الله مثالها إذا جاءت يوم القيامة. So عرض, so it's from the verb عرض, which means to present. So to present, to see physically and to be presented with something. So it says عرضت علي الأمم. So تاء التأنيث, because is مؤنث, جمع غير عاقل. So he says عرضت علي. So obviously على is a حرف جر, زائد أنا. So على حرف جر زائد أنا يساوي علي, on me. So عرضت علي الأمم. So the so عرضت علي الأمم, which means that the nations were presented to me, علي, to me. It is said, كان ذلك, it is said, this was during كان ذلك ليلة الإسرار, that this was during the Layla, the night of the Isra, the night journey. أي أراه الله. So again, this أراه is from the فعل رباعي. So we mentioned رأى means to see. أرى means to cause you to see. So he mentions أي أراه الله. Allah caused him to see. هو يعود إلى النبي. الضمير المتصل يعود إلى النبي. أراه الله مثالها, that Allah showed him مثالها, the example of it, i.e. the example of the nations, the previous nations, إذا جاءت, when they will come, يوم القيامة, when they will come on the day of judgment. So in the Laylatul Israr, he mentions Allah showed the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam all of the previous nations and how they will come on the day of judgment. So he mentions رأيت النبي فرأيت النبي, so I saw a prophet, ومعه رهط, ومعه الرهط. So الرهط, he says, الجماعة دون العشرة, is a group of people دون العشرة, يعني أقل من 10, a less than 10. دون means less. العشرة. So you could say Rahd is mentioned in the Quran in a, yeah. So when we hear Rahd, that it means a group of people less than 10. And then he says, ليس معه أحد. So رأيت النبي وليس معه أحد. That I saw a messenger and nobody was with him. أي لم يتبعه من قومه أحد. لم يتبعه من قومه أحد. أي none of his people followed him. None of his people followed him. سواد عظيم. Then he says, فنظرت. He says, رفع لي سواد عظيم. Then سواد عظيم. He says, then I was presented with سواد عظيم. That he saw سواد عظيم. أي أشخاص كثيرة. Many people. سواد عظيم. فظننت, and I thought, أنهم, that they were أمتي, that they were my nation. أي لكثرتهم. I, because of لكثرتهم, the vast number of them, or the vast amount of them. وبعده عنهم. فلا, and he says, because of the amount of them, and because he was the distance of him from them, that he was far away from them. فلا يميز أعيانهم. So he couldn't recognize who they were. So that's why he says, I thought they were my nation, i.e. because he was far away from them, they were far away from him, that he couldn't recognize them. Then Musa, ay Musa ibn Imran, Kalim Allah. So we know, so we've gone through that before. وقومه أي أتباعه. Musa وقومه أي أتباعه, his followers, على دينه, on his religion, من بني إسرائيل. نعم. And then he mentions بلا حساب ولا عذاب. So when we get to the main part of the point that we're getting to, that he mentions that there were سبعون ألف, that there were 70,000 who, that they will enter paradise بلا حساب ولا عذاب, أي لا يحاسبون ولا يعذبون, that they will not be taken to account ولا يعذبون, and they will not be punished. Okay. So yuhasabun, obviously it's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take everybody to account and you'll be asked about everything you've done. So, and the reckoning with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is difficult. That being asked about everything you've done and not being able, obviously you will never be able to hide anything. So everything that a person does in this life, that if we are taken to account, then this is when the reality of what we used to do comes known. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us about constantly throughout the Quran. As he says in ayat, when Allah, so in Surah Al-Baqarah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing or talking about marriage and divorce, and when a person is divorcing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will end the ayahs and he mentions وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ فَاحْذَرُوا. And he says, and you should know that Allah knows what is in your hearts. فَاحْذَرُوا. So be warned. So we can say things in this life that I meant this and I intend this, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who truly knows what we intend, and He is the one who's going to take us to account of that, for that on the Day of Judgment. So you can trick the people, but we can't trick Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that will become apparent on the Day of Judgment. And we can convince ourselves all we want, but we know what the reality and the truth is. So we should be truthful to ourselves and other people. Now, as the reckoning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one will escape it, and no one will be able to hide from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So many, as in the other ayat, when the person sees his book, when he says, مَا لِهَذَا الْكِتَابِ لَا يُغَادِرُ صَغِيرَةً وَلَا كَبِيرَةً إِلَّا أَحْصَاهَا وَوَجَدُوا مَا عَمِلُوا حَاضِرًا. That when a person sees his book and his book of deeds, he will say, woe to me, what is this book? لَا يُغَادِرُ صَغِيرَةً. That it hasn't missed out the smallest of things, وَلَا كَبِيرَةً, and the larger of things, إِلَّا أَحْصَاهَا, except that it has recorded them and they are present. وَوَجَدُوا, and they will find مَا عَمِلُوا, that which they used to do, حَاضِرًا, in front of them. It's present there. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. Befitting. And he says, and your Lord does not harm and oppress anybody. i.e., you shall see what is in that book, and you will realize your demise is not from Allah, it's from you yourself. So don't blame anybody except yourselves. As the Messenger ﷺ used to say, فَمَنْ وَجَدَ خَيْرًا فَلْيَحْمَدِ اللَّهِ. So whoever finds good, then he should praise Allah. وَمَنْ وَجَدَ غَيْرَ ذَلِكَ فَلَا يَلُومَنَّ إِلَّا نَفْسَهُ. And whoever finds other than that, let him not blame anybody but himself. So لا يحاسبون ولا يعذبون, and they will not be punished قبل دخولهم. So when we look at these two things, we can see these are two great things that if you, on the Day of Judgment, لا تحاسب ولا تعذب. So this is why we see the merit of the companions, that they knew of these two affairs and how great that they are and how they feared them more than anybody else. أي قبل دخولهم الجنة, أي before they're entering a paradise, لتحقيقهم التوحيد. So the reason why لا يحاسبون ولا يعذبون, because of them acting upon and implementing Tawheed. This was the reason. ثم نهض أي قام. So he mentions ثم نهض أي, then he stood up. فخاض الناس في أولئك أي تباحث الحاضرون واختلفوا. So let's take the meaning. So khada is from the verb khada yakhudu, which means to immerse into something or to dive into something. So the people, so basically in this context, فَخَاضَ النَّاسُ فِي أُولَٰئِكَ. So the people started to discuss the affair of these people, i.e. 70,000, the 70,000. أي تباحث الحاضرون, that those who were present when the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam they began to discuss واختلفوا, and they began to differ في أولئك السبعين with regards to these 70, i.e. the 70,000 people. أي بأي عمل, that what was the بأي عمل, of which was the action نالوا. So نال is from the verb نال ينال, which means to obtain something. هذه الدرجة. So the companions, because they were extremely always looking for what do they have to do to obtain this merit. So they started discussing which was the action which caused them to obtain this level. فإنهم لم ينالوها إلا بعمل. فما هو? So they said, so he mentions, because they did not obtain this, أي هذه الدرجة, except with an action. So you see how the companions understood the religion, that you don't obtain something except by way of actions, that you don't just sit back and wait for things to happen, or you don't receive things just because you are who you are, that it's done, or merits are done and levels are reached because of actions. And then this is فما هو. So if we go to, so we don't skip some of the hadith. So in the first, فقال بعضهم, so some of them said, which he doesn't mention here, so we'll go for it. We'll go through it. فلعلهم, so obviously we remember لعل from our Medina book 2. So لعل here تفيد ماذا؟ الترجي. فلعلهم, so maybe, or it is hoped that they are الذين صحبوا رسول الله. So they said that it is hoped that they are those who accompanied the Messenger of Allah, i.e. them. They hoped that they were from them. فقال بعضهم, and some of them said, فلعلهم الذين ولدوا في الإسلام ولم يشركوا بالله شيئا. He says, and it is hoped that they are those who were born into Islam and that they never ascribed or committed shirk with Allah, anything with Allah. وذكروا أشياء, and he mentions, and they mentioned وذكروا أشياء. So أشياء is the plural of شيء. So they mentioned many things other than that. فخرج رسول الله فأخبروا. So when the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam came out, so when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that, he stood and he left. And then they started to discuss it. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came out to them, فأخبروه أي ذكروا للنبي, i.e. they mentioned it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. اختلافهم, their disagreements. So obviously it's not arguments, they were all discussing of who these people could be. Okay, so اختلاف here doesn't necessarily mean that they were arguing. No, they just differed in their understanding of who they were. في المراد بهؤلاء السبعين, with the intent of who these 70,000 were. So he mentions سبعين, the 70, obviously it's سبعين ألف, obviously. So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا يسترقون. So لا يسترقون أي, so it means لا يطلبون من يرقيهم استغناء عن الناس. So they do not request that somebody performs ruqya upon them استغناء عن الناس, i.e. wanting to be free from the help of people. So we'll understand the reason in this part. وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ. Why? Because they totally rely upon Allah. So the first attribute is لا يسترقون. They don't seek ruqya. So I've heard like some of the scholars saying that, so لا يطلبون من يرقيهم, that they do not request people to perform ruqya from them. But if you, for example, if someone was ill and you just performed ruqya upon them without them requesting it, then he said that that wouldn't fall into this because they didn't request it. So if you were with someone and they were ill and you just performed the ruqya upon them without them requesting it, then some of them say that then you wouldn't fall into this. ولا يكتوون أي لا يسألون غيرهم أن يكويهم بالنار. So لا يكتوون, which is known as cauterization. So it's an old method that when a person would receive an injury or he'd have an open wound, that they would take steel or iron and then they would burn that wound in order to seal it. سَلَا يَكْتَوُونَ. So it's called al-kayya. ولا يتطيرون أي لا يتشاءمون بالطيور ونحوه. لا يتطيرون, i.e. they do not take omens. So لا يتشاءمون. So this is from the verb تشاءم يتشاءم, which is usually translated as being pessimistic. لا يتشاءمون بالطيور, with birds. As we know that they used to, if they wanted to do something and they saw a certain amount of birds flying in a certain direction, then they would take it as a bad omen, and then they would abstain from doing that action. And if they saw a certain amount of birds flying a certain way, they would take it as a good omen. So they were, so it was just based upon nonsense and pessimism. As the Prophet ﷺ, that he used to encourage at-tafa'ul. So at-tafa'ul is the opposite of at-tasha'um. At-tafa'ul. That the Messenger ﷺ, that he never ma kana yatasha'am, that he was never pessimistic, that he always had at-tafa'ul. So what's the opposite of التشاؤم? بالطيور ونحوها, and other than that. And he mentions وعلى ربهم يتوكلون أي يعتمدون. So from the verb اعتمد, which means to rely upon Allah, or to rely upon something. اعتمد. So يعتمدون في جميع أمورهم عليه. So obviously the ha يعود إلى الله or إلى الرب. So they rely in all of their affairs upon him. لا على غيره, and not other than him. فيفوضون أمورهم إليه. So فوض, يفوض. يفوضون. So it means like you surrender. فوض أمرك إلى الله. So you can say فوض موسى أمره إلى الله. That Musa surrendered his affair to Allah, that he entrusted his affair with Allah. So the definition generally of tawakkul, they would say tafweed. So you should memorize this this definition, which is tafweed al-umur so we'll write it here. التوكل يعني تفويض. Can't spell. اعتمد means to rely upon something. نعم. So تفويض الأمور إلى الله. So the definition of التوكل with the scholars is تفويض الأمور is surrendering your affairs or the affairs إلى الله بأخذ الأسباب. So it's surrendering تفويض الأمور إلى الله, your affairs to Allah, بأخذ الأسباب, by taking the necessary measures. So asbab, sabab is the plural of sabab, which is a cause. So you take the necessary measures when you're doing an action, you do all that you can, and then تفويض الأمور إلى الله بأخذ الأسباب, that you surrender your affairs to Allah by taking the necessary measures and precautions. So we obviously know that this is in opposition to the Sufiya and other than them, who they're just تفويض الأمور إلى الله فقط, and they don't take any actions whatsoever or any precautions. And then the last part he mentions, so then when Ukasha stood up and he says, Ud'u Allah, supplicate to Allah, Ud'u Allah, fi'al amr, Allah maf'ulun bihi, an yaj'alani, that he makes me, so we'll go minhum, that he makes me from them. And then the Prophet ﷺ said to him, Anta minhum, you are from them. And then another man stood up and he said the same thing. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Sabaqaka biha ukasha. So sabaqa means to come before something. So he says, Sabaqaka biha ukasha. So ukasha has preceded you. Akasha has beat you to it. أي إلى إحراز هذه الصفات. أي إحراز. So إحراز يعني وصول. So أي عكاشة أي إلى إحراز هذه الصفات, that he has beat you to obtaining هذه الصفات, these characteristics, i.e. that he will enter paradise or he will be from these people. أو سبقك بالسؤال, or he has preceded you or he beat you بالسؤال, by asking. So if we quickly just go back to the hadith and we read it again, and if there's anything that's so now, bi'idhnillah, obviously it takes time to learn all the words, but now we should be able to understand the narration a lot better than the beginning. So عن حسين بن عبد الرحمن, so we understand that. قال كنت عند سعيد بن جبير. He says كنت عند, I was with سعيد بن جبير. فقال أيكم, who from amongst you, رأى الكوكب, who saw the shooting star, الذي, which انقض البارحة, which, so we mentioned انقض means to fall, last night. فقلت أنا, so he said I. ثم قلت, then he said أما إني, as for me, لم أكن في صلاة. And in Sheikh Fawzan's explanation, that he will explain when we get to it why he said this, and it's a very beautiful point which Sheikh Fawzan makes in his explanation. He says, as for me, lam akun fi salatin, that I was not in prayer, i.e. during the night. Walakinni ludightu, but I was stung. So he said, so what did you do? قلت ارتقيت, I performed ruqya. قال ما حملك على ذلك. So now we know it means ما دليلك أو ما حجتك على ذلك. What is your proof for doing that? قلت, I said, حديث. So if we look probably in the translations of this question, we'll probably find that it says, why did you do that? قلت, he says, due to a hadith, حدثناه الشعبي, which had الشعبي narrated to us. قال, he said, وما حدثكم, and what did he narrate to you? قلت, I said, حدثنا عن بريدة بن الحصيب, that he said, لا رقية إلا من عين أو حمى, that there is no ruqyah except from the ayn and huma, i.e. so from evil eye and a sting or a bite. قال, he said, قد أحسن من انتهى إلى ما سمع. So now we understand the meaning is that قد أحسن من, that the person, he has أحسن, he's done, how would you translate it? So he has done what? As you can see, I'm not a good translator at all. He has done well, yeah. So it mentions قد أحسن, that the person who stops إلى ما سمع, at that which he hears, i.e. he acts upon what he hears. So he said this, obviously, due to this. So he performed ruqya upon himself. Why? Because of this huma, because of a sting. So he was asked why he done it, and he narrated the hadith, لا رقية إلا من عين أو حمى. So he mentioned this, i.e. he acted upon the hadith. And when he was asked why he done the action, he narrated it. He narrated it because of a hadith which he heard from such and such. So he said to him that he has done a good deed because he has acted upon what he heard. He says, وَلَكِنْ حَدَّثَنَاهُ ابْنُ عَبَّاسٍ عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال that عُرِضَتْ عَلَيَّ الْأُمَمِ, so that the nations were presented to me. So we mentioned, it was mentioned that this took place on It's said that it was during the night of Isra. فرأيت النبي ومعه الرهط أي جماعة من الناس دون 10 والنبي ومعه الرجل والرجلان, and a prophet who had one person with him and 2 people with him. والنبي وليس معه أحد, and a prophet who had nobody with him. إذ رفع لي سواد عظيم. So then it was presented to me أي أشخاص كثيرة, and I thought فظننت أنهم أمتي, and I thought that they were my nation. فقيل لي, and it was said to me, هذا موسى وقومه أي أتباعه من بني إسرائيل. فنظرت, and then I looked, فإذا سواد عظيم, and so again there was أشخاص كثيرة, so more than the people of Musa. فقيل لي, and it was said to me, هذه أمتك, this is your nation, ومعهم, and with them are 70,000. يدخلون الجنة, who will enter paradise بغير حساب ولا عذاب. ثم نهض, ثم قام, فدخل منزله, and he entered his house. فخاض الناس في أولئك, أي اختلف الناس في أولئك, من هم؟ فقال بعضهم, some of them says, فلعلهم الذين صحبوا رسول الله. فقال بعضهم فلعلهم الذين ولدوا, that they were born في الإسلام ولم يشركوا بالله شيئا, and they didn't ascribe anything with Allah. As we know, so many of the companions before the Islam, that they were mushrikun. ثم تابوا ودخلوا في الإسلام وأحسنوا إسلامهم, and then they repented, they became Muslim, they entered into Islam, and then they perfected their religion, and they became from the people of paradise. وذكروا أشياء, and they mentioned many things. And then the messenger, فخرج رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, and then the messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم came out to them. فأخبروه فقال, and they mentioned to him, i.e. what they'd been discussing. فقال, and he said, هم الذين لا يسترقون, that they are those who do not request ruqya, ولا يكتوون, and they do not perform cauterization, ولا يتطيرون, as we mentioned what this meant as well. وعلى ربهم يتوكلون, and rather they rely upon their Lord. We mentioned التوكل, that it's تفويض الأمور إلى الله بأخذ الأسباب. فقال عكاشة ibn محصن said, أدعو الله أن يجعلني منهم, supplicate to Allah to make me from them. قال أنت منهم. ثم قال رجل آخر, then another man stood up. فقال, and he says, أدعو الله أن يجعلني منهم. فقال سبقك بها عكاشة. So عكاشة as has beaten you to it, or he's preceded you. So عكاشة has preceded you with it. طيب نكتفي بهذا وانتهينا من الحديث, فما بقي إلا الشرح والمعنى الإجمالي للحديث. So we're just going to take in the lesson the general or a concise explanation by the Sheikh, and we usually add some of the explanations. So sometimes I take from the explanation of Sheikh Ibn Baz rahimahullah, sometimes he has, or many of the times he has amazing benefits also. طيب نكتفي بهذا. هل من سؤال, any questions or clarifications?
السلام عليكم أستاذ.
وعليكم السلام.
Now, if someone goes to Rukia, and someone that can do Rukia for him because of Ain or Humma, that one, is it can be among those who will enter paradise without hisab wala hadab?
then no, he would not fall into this hadith. I think it's very clear. So so it shows generally the level of at-tawakkul. So if we go back to the chapter heading, Bab man haqqaqa at-tawhid, that the person, it's the chapter of the people who implement tawheed. So a person who, for example, so it can show many things. That generally, if you have people, Wallahu ta'ala alam, but that the people who don't seek the ruqyah is due to what? Their level of tawheed and their strong level of tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As these are the main characteristics, لا يسترقون ولا يكتوون ولا يتطيرون, and the reason of that is because وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. But there is no harm, obviously, if a person is ill and he is affected with evil eye, or he could be affected with mess or evil eye or magic, that they are taken to someone who can help them with that. Because some people, they can't do that, or you have ignorant people that they're of different levels. You have people who understand these types of hadith and that they should be have patience and make dua, supplicate to Allah, increase in their worship, and then ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant them shifa or shafa'ah. And then after their patience, then they are rewarded by way of this. But sometimes, as I get your question. So yeah, sometimes that levels of people, you have to judge the people on their levels. So you get very ignorant people, and sometimes these causes, as I've seen myself, that people have been affected by certain things and people have performed the ruqyah upon them, and then after that it's caused them to become better Muslims and to practice their religion a lot better than they were doing before. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. But a person, he should constantly be on his guard, protecting himself in the morning and the evening. That we should be doing our adhkar, reading the Ayatul Kursi after each salah, especially in the morning and the evening, reading the supplications. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق, 3 times in the evening, 3 times after the Fajr, and the other supplications. And it's well known that people who perform and are ardent upon and regular upon performing these supplications, that the shayateen cannot come near them. They don't go near them. How can a person know he is afflicted with the evil eye? This is a whole different topic. But it's generally like, why would a person think of this in the first place? So a person will usually say, for example, I think I have evil eye. Why? Because something has changed in that person that wasn't there before. So, for example, a person, you know, he may be good in business and Allah gives him tawfiq in business and he makes money. And then all of a sudden, his asbab of business cut off, or he starts to like he has no more motivation for it. So usually it's something that that there is a dramatic change in the person. So, for example, a person, he's good at writing, and then all of a sudden he even finds it difficult to hold a pen in his hand. And it's usually, so basically you have to narrow it down to what it is that's bothering you, or what it is that you find that you cannot do. And then you try to narrow it down to what happened, or usually if a person thinks, he can narrow it down to the time of when he thinks it happens or she thinks it happens and who was with them at that time. And as we said, we're living in a time of social media. So some people who have themselves out there online can become affected by multiple people without them even knowing. So the person should, first of all, turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to lift the evil eye from him. And that's by way of reading Surah Falaq and Surah An-Nas. So if a person, he feels that he has evil eye, obviously make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise it from you. Read Surah Falaq and Surah An-Nas repeatedly. And some people who do this, they find it difficult to read Surah Nas and Surah Falaq more than 10 times, which is usually a sign that, yes, they are afflicted with something. So a person should check and read these ad'iyah, read Quran, Surah Baqarah, etc. So we can't go into all the details of this because it's such a huge topic. But through experience, some experience on this subject, usually 99% of people, that they're not afflicted. Some people who have afflictions, like with ayn or so-called sihr, magic, or possession by shaitan, that the vast majority, 99 or 95% of people, are not afflicted with anything. But it is the qareen, the shaitan, who is in all of us, as all of us have a qareen, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, and he said, even you, O Messenger of Allah, he says, even me, but Allah has enabled me to overpower it, and it only reminds me or advises me to do good. So usually what happens, this qareen, alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas, the one who whispers into the hearts of man, that they cause a lot of trouble with you. So they will start to whisper to you, and if you start to listen, they will increase and they will increase up until they will cause you to believe that you have evil eye, or they will cause you to believe that such and such has done magic on you, and they will start to convince you, and they can even to a certain amount take control of your body and cause you to think that you have possession. So then people go to a raqi, a person who does ruqyah, and there's many of them these days, and there's many of them who are not experienced, and they read upon the person, and this qareen leads them to believe that, yes, they have magic. So through past experience, many people have been misdiagnosed by people and it's nothing but the qareen messing about and playing with that person and trying to destroy their life. And the main goal, as we know, is to get you away from your religion, to stop you to performing adhkar. So you perform adhkar, you find it difficult, so you stop doing it. You read Quran, but you find it difficult, so you stop doing it. And then so it builds up one by one until you're just down to the bare minimum of even trying to hold on to 5 daily prayers. And then you live your life in fear, and you're living your life in paranoia, thinking that people are against you. Why? Because it started off just by a few whispers, and it built up and built up. So when this happens, there are many people who suffer from waswasa, from the whispering, and you must stop it. You must put an end to it, and you must turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wa ala, as I mentioned in a hadith, wa ala rabbihim yatawakkalun. So turn back to Allah, supplicate to Him, repent from previous sins, ask Him to help you. And whenever these whispers come, you ignore them. So whenever they tell you to do or think that it's something which is negative, do the opposite and do that which is good. Now, there's much advice from the scholars with regards to these affairs. But it's something that's very serious, and many people are affected by it. And people say, we've heard it said that many people, they say, oh, how come many practicing people are affected with such things? So it reminds me of the statement of Ibn Abbas when someone came to him and they said to him, Al-Yahud yaz'amun annahum la yajiduna waswasa fi salatihim. He says that the Jews, that they claim that they don't have any whispers whilst they're praying. So as we know that when you pray, shaitan comes to you, that khanzab, that shaitan who comes to you and he whispers to you in the salah. And he says, udhkur kada wa kada. He starts to tell you, remember this, remember that, remember this, remember that. So the Jews someone came to Abdullah ibn Abbas, and they said to him that the Jews claim that they don't find, or they're not whispered to whilst they're praying. And he says, فَمَاذَا يَصْنَعُ الشَّيْطَانِ بِقَلْبٍ فَارِغٍ. Because, and what would shaitan do with an empty heart? So shaitan leaves those types of people. So again, if you are a person upon Tawheed and upon the Sunnah of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then obviously you are going to be targeted by shaitan and the shayateen. So what's required is that you rely upon Allah, you ardent upon your salah, your salawat, and your adhkar after the salawat, which is a shame that we see many of the people in the masajid, as soon as the imam gives the taslim, they stand up and they go, or they start talking to each other. This is aib. This is something not practiced by the people of Sunnah. They don't just start talking or get up when the salah finished. They remain in their place and they do their adhkar for the many reasons and the many benefits. And from them is that they guard themselves by way of these ad'iyah. Now, so it doesn't harm anyone to sit there for a few minutes, do his adhkar, then turn to the person and talk. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. So someone has told me long back, a thief steals from the one who has wealth and not an empty house. So this, the narration I mentioned from Ibn Abbas is in the book of Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawzi, which is Al-Wabil al-Sayyib. So Al-Wabil al-Sayyib is a book Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah he wrote on adhkar, just like Hisn al-Muslim. So he wrote a book on adhkar, and in the first chapters he discusses the son of Adam and his constant battle with Iblis, and it's an amazing discussion what takes place and what happens constantly between the son of Adam and Shaitan. And from them he mentions what the sister just mentioned, and he mentioned about he mentions 3 houses. The house of so he likens the belief of the believer, of the Muslim, to 3 houses, and the houses represent the Muslim, and the 3 houses are different. So you have the poor man's house, which doesn't contain anything. So the thief, he comes to that house. Who is Shaitan? The thief is Shaitan, and he finds nothing, so he leaves it. He has no guards. Then he comes to the one that he has a wall around his house and he has some possessions. So Shaitan, he waits by that house, and eventually he finds a way into that house. Obviously, so he cases that house, and eventually he will find a way into that house. And then he comes to another house which has a wall, guards, and so he lays in wait, trying to find a way into that house. And so he likens that house to the iman of a strong believer who performs his adhkar, etc., etc., does righteous actions. And then he mentions that he will find his way in sometimes. And he mentions that he finds his way in by 3 affairs. And those 3 affairs, if I'm not mistaken, he says, are the affairs which all of us have. And he says, even our father Adam, who was the most intelligent of mankind, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمُ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he taught Adam the names of everything. And it wasn't just the names, but it was the meaning of those things. So Adam alayhi salam was of the most patient and of the most intelligent of mankind, and yet Shaitan managed to cause him to slip. And Ibn al-Qayyim mentions, so how about us from the sons of Adam who are less than him? So he says the 3 ways which Shaitan gets to a person is through his desires and his anger, and thirdly his heedlessness. And he says, because there are times within our lives, if you face reality, there are times when we are heedless, we're not on our guard. There are always times where we become angry, and there are times when we have desires. And he says, so هذه أبواب الثلاثة, so these 3 doors is how Shaitan gets to the son of Adam, through these 3 doors. And then he goes on to the discussion is amazing, and he mentions also with regards to a person's actions that if so, people, as we know, we can do actions which cause our affairs and our actions to become null and void. We can say things, we can do certain things, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has wiped away all of our actions and we don't even perceive it. And he goes into discussion of, can you get those actions back by making etc., etc. So it's a great discussion. It's a book really that should be taught. It was taught in the late 90s. Sheikh Rabi bin Hadi al-Madkhali, hafidhahullah, that he used to teach it in his house in Al-Madinah when he lived in Medina in the 90s. And he's there again now. Hafidhahullah. طيب نكتفي بهذا، والله تعالى أعلم وأعلى، وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين، وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاكم الله خير.